bad news for the leadership of Israel is that they are in fact tenants, and they have ruined the vineyard, and the owner is angry. See the way in which a parable pulls you in and then spits you out? They got it. We may not get it, but they got it. They understood exactly what Jesus is talking about, and they were not happy. Then Jesus has a little bit of a go at the current construction projects going up around Jerusalem. He says, all you people of the accumulated capital who build these great monuments to your wealth, which was going on in the time this story was being written, in the late Second Temple period. The Herodian temple reconstruction project was going on. Lots of building was being done. And Jesus says, oh yeah, by the way, haven't you ever read this story? This is Jesus, who's always trying to challenge the biblical literacy of his audience. Haven't you ever read this story where the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone? This is the Jesus who just has gone and tried to turn over tables in the temple. He said that your whole building project is wrong-headed because you've rejected the cornerstone. He's going right at it. See all the different levels of meaning to these stories? The traditional theological interpretation is not entirely wrong, because even in Isaiah's parable, in some sense, the vineyard is the people. But what the text does is it's taking actual concrete economic relationships and giving them a twist so that people who are in denial can see that they are in error. You are the man, says Nathan. Because he's just trying to get them to see that this is all about the fact that we are a social ecology. We are a land. And the problem of our land is what? What does Isaiah argue? What is the problem with the vineyard? Why not? Because there are too few landowners. Too much joining house to house and field to field. That's what Isaiah's argument is about. That's why there's bloodshed. That's why there's injustice. That's why there's no yield. That's why there's diminishing returns, because there's concentrating wealth. I didn't write it, Isaiah did. And it makes ecological sense too. So Jesus goes from Shepparton to Jerusalem, Melbourne. I'm getting confused here. Anyway, he goes to the big city and he talks with the architects of grandeur. The absentee landlords, the corporations who are dividing and conquering the land and the surrounding countrysides, the Melbourne elites who control the regional centers through the concentration of capital. But of course, it's only a fish, bigger fish eat the smaller fish, because the people who think they're in control in Melbourne are probably being controlled by, I better not say that.
People who take our markets.
So let's not bring Sydney into the picture. Let's talk about foreign capital. Let's talk about maybe my country. Right, all the big shots in Melbourne who can control the regional economy are in fact being controlled by the global capital managers who are controlling the economy of Australia. That's the world of the pharaohs and the Babylonian kings and the big fish eating the smaller fish. And it's people out in the provinces who feel the bite. They are rebellious tenants. They're angry. They want their land back. They are farmers who understand how difficult it is, how much they're losing their land. And Jesus is trying to talk both to the people in the country. Listen, you have to believe that it's not the land's fault. The land can produce. And talk to the people in the cities. Your problem is that you've got too much. You've joined house to house, field to field. You control all the action. You think you're owners, but you're only tenants. Isn't that the Jubilee argument? See, you folks think you own and control this thing, but you don't. God owns it. Your job is to find ways to keep redistributing it.
The interesting thing at the end of the story is that the people, the priests and so on, they'd had their eyes open, and then they wanted to kill the person who'd opened their eyes. And in fact, they do.
Sure.
The same as we had a person just across the border in a town where drugs were being grown who opened people's eyes to what was going on, and he disappeared and his body's never been recovered.
Sure.
So why do we continue with this? Because in fact it doesn't change.
Well, to see it would be to have to change, to have to turn around. And so there are only two possibilities. You either turn around or you continue to live in denial. And part of trying to destroy the messenger is to keep reinforcing a world of denial. And those are the politics of the world we live in. It's all about people who try to expose what's going on being disposed of. Two options, I think, today, in terms of the storytelling and how minds and hearts are shaped. We've got either the stories of the Bible, like the ones we've read, and Carol reminded me that even though we can ever only deal with certain stories at any given time, the genius of the Bible, like all good traditional storytelling, is it's really telling the same story over and over and over again. In other words, it's not so much like a jigsaw puzzle as it is like retelling in lots of different ways, with lots of different characters, with different points of view depending on what kinds of people you're talking to. You're telling the same story. The story is about the journey away from Egypt. And therefore, I believe that in the biblical storytelling, we can start anywhere and get anywhere. And I hope you've seen a little bit of that at work out of these texts in Mark. That you can start with any text in Mark, and if you know Mark well enough, you can get anywhere in Mark. You'll be flipping all over the place because of the constant recurrence of symbols and phrases. And similarly, you'll be all over the Hebrew Bible because it's retelling those old stories. The way I like to put it is, all roads lead everywhere in the Bible. But you know, biblical literacy is something that we practice. We need to remember that we start with what people know. We don't scold them for what they don't know. That's discouraging. And it can oftentimes sound like just one more religious authority, condemning people for not doing enough of this or that. So rather than starting with a negative, let's just start with a positive, and that is, let's just open the Bible and start reading. And find our way around. Maybe it'll take longer. Maybe we won't quite as quickly make the connections. But it is all about practice. And it is all about telling stories, and I believe everybody knows how to tell stories. What we have to do is we have to suspend some of our theological judgments so that we can take the time to really read what's happening in the story. Let the story speak more on its own terms and not immediately begin imposing the big meaning questions on it. The alternative to that is this. Can you zoom in on that? You got to get a quick zoom shot of this, Paul. This is a text. I'll show this text to the other side while I'm at it. These are the alternatives. These are obviously just two examples of the alternatives. Of course, these texts all tell the same story too, in different ways. This is an advertisement for vodka. This is a news story about the launching of the space shuttle. This comes from reputed high-class journalism telling me facts. This comes from Madison Avenue upmarket advertising, just telling us what we need.